We now have the one, the only, Jonathan Jeet.
Cool. All right. Hey, everyone. So I'm just going to dive right in. When I was considering the thought of testimony, there's something that my mind started to really hone in on the idea of what makes a testimony so powerful. Because there's a difference between somebody sharing a testimony and somebody telling you about their life experiences. When somebody tells me about their life experiences, I'm positioned to be in a place where I'm an involuntary therapist sometimes, or you just kind of listen. But when somebody is telling me their testimony, I'm in a place where I'm receiving faith, and I'm in a place where I'm receiving encouragement. And that really had me interested, because testimony, what gives it that power to deposit hope? What gives it that power to deposit encouragement? What gives it that ability to be able to impart something that is in me through my experiences onto those that are listening?
Wow.
And what I've come to this conclusion is Jonathan's working definition of testimony is God's story through my story. See, there's your story and my story, it's just us. But when we add God to the equation, it gives it purpose, it gives it power, it gives it the ability to impart onto others. And so the passage that I want to read today really speaks of a moment when God's story intervened with the story of the subject of the passage. And the result of that was a testimony was built, it was erected. So that's sort of the context of it. I'm just going to dive right in and read it. So it's found in Joshua chapter 4. I'm going to read from verse 4 to, let's go just a few verses and then we'll cut it off. So Joshua 4. So Joshua called together the 12 men that he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, "Go before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of disciples of the Israelites," so 12, "to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." Now, there's a whole lot of context before this passage and after this passage. But what I want to focus on is the idea that they erected this altar, these stones, these monuments, before they actually went and took conquest of the promised land. And the idea was that God said, hey, build your testimony about what I have done in your life now. See, most of us wait to share our testimony or give ourselves permission to not share our testimony because we're in the middle of it. Like we're in the middle of our process before the fulfillment of a promise. And yet here, what we see is God showing up in the process, in the nitty gritty, in a place where it's before the good stuff happens, before the place where we would like to share, before my success story when I finally become a celebrity online. Instead, God shows up in the places where I'm at now. And he says, here's where I showed up for you. Will you build an altar for me? And in the Old Testament, or even in ancient civilizations, they had this practice where you would build monuments to testify of God. And if you've ever been to, I checked out Israel a while back, man, these architectural buildings, they exemplify God. It invokes worship. But in the New Testament, we have something else. We become the temple of God. We become the place where the Holy Spirit dwells. And the cool thing is that the beautiful thing about the Trinity, which nobody can actually quantify, but the idea is that each figure of the Godhead testifies of each other. Well, what do you think the Holy Spirit does within us? It groans, it worships, it testifies of Jesus, of God within us. And so this idea of testimony is me taking my story and adding God to the equation and testifying of God's story through my story. And this is the process of testimony that keeps on working because it doesn't end with me. And that's what I love that is shown actually in Ecclesiastes. This guy, the writer, he had everything. He was the smartest guy. He had a bunch of experiences of life, things that we wouldn't imagine, and he achieved it. But at the end of it, he says, all of this is meaningless, except the whole duty of man is to fear God and obey his commandments. It's funny because when we have a story for ourselves, it's so meaningless. Another word for it in the Bible is hevel, which means like a breath, a fleeting moment. It lives and dies with us. not so encouraging, I know. But when you add God to the equation, it becomes this place where it goes on enduring because it's God's story through my story.
So good.
Yeah.
That's all.
Jonathan the Pro hitting there right on 0. Thank you, Jonathan. That was awesome.